people will be watching the live stream, but I don't know how well being able to film over a live stream. I don't know. I don't mean to feel like after next week.
How did you fare in the 2020 floods? Because the lake, you're like, that's like the edge of the lake, right? Sort of, yeah.
Not far, just in assisted living place. And
Okay.
So from one floor to the other, and she had.
Thank you. You're welcome. Oh, can't wait. Ready? Hey, Kassia. You guys ready? This is Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Sean. I'm with North Branch Nature Center. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Naturalist Journeys, our annual winter presentation series in its 30th year now, bringing conservationists, ecologists, scientists, authors, educators, travelers, photographers, nice, friendly people into this room to talk about their connections with nature. This year is all about river resilience and how we can learn different tools to become better residents of our watershed. And like, what is a watershed, by the way? And then all the way down to like, how do we choose which miles of river in Montpelier's, in Vermont, 7,000 miles of river are the ones to focus on as top priority for conservation. Or maybe it's next week, coming back at this exact time. Is that true? No. February 12th. Thursday. Next Thursday, right here, learning about the role of small-scale hydropower in our region and how that intersects with watershed resilience and that sort of thing. So if you haven't seen our whole Naturalist Journeys series, there's posters all over the place. There's some handouts in the back, so please join us for the rest of the series. Naturalist Journeys is made possible by viewers like you, and, but especially thanks to our sponsors. So this year we have 100 Mountain Co-op, Waite Heindel Environmental, Catamount Solar, Onion River Outdoors, and Washington Electric Co-op. So please, let's give a round of applause for our sponsors. And also thank you to Lake Champlain Basin Program that are making possible all of our river resilience work last fall and this winter into the spring. So thanks to them for that as well. And yeah, thank you to you all for supporting North Branch Nature Center. If you aren't a member yet and would like to become one, chat with us. Go to our website. There's lots of ways to find your way towards the membership page. If you'd like to make a contribution, there's even more ways to find a way to donate to North Branch Nature Center. So thanks for your support now and in the future. Let's see, there is tea in the kitchen. Please help yourself if you'd like. Don't feel bashful about getting up and walking back there to get yourself a cup of tea through the presentation. Let's see, I'm going to ask folks to hold their questions till the end. One, because we'll have plenty of time for that, but two, because there are folks watching on the live stream, hello folks on the live stream, or watching the recording one day, 10 years from now. And it's difficult to capture the audio of people asking questions back and forth in the middle of the presentation. So just to make it easier for those that are online, and there's about as many folks online as there are in the room right now. Just if we can do Q&A at the end, and then ask your question in a way that Kassia and Erin can have a chance of being able to summarize that and repeat it, if that makes sense. So, because we're going to ask them, since they're the ones mic'd up, we're going to ask them to repeat your questions so that folks in the live stream can hear it. Okay, sound good? Great. With that, we have been working with Vermont River Conservancy on all sorts of things here at North Branch Nature Center. Especially the North Branch part of North Branch Nature Center. Vermont River Conservancy has been working for decades now on conserving and stewarding our rivers here in Vermont and are really at the forefront of river science and river conservation. And we have our two co-directors of the Vermont River Conservancy, Kassia Randzio and Erin Vries, here to talk with us about how we even prioritize which miles of river are the ones that we're focusing on first, and how that intersects with floods and ecology and all the rest. So with that, please help me welcome Erin and Kassia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. I recognize several of you from previous North Branch Nature Center programs around town, And first want to thank North Branch Nature Center for hosting us here, but also this amazing series. Rivers are so central to our work, of course, as Vermont River Conservancy. And it's really exciting to see so many people showing up really week after week to connect with rivers in this way and learn and explore together. So thank you for being here, and thanks, North Branch. And I'm Kassia Randzio, and this is Erin Vries. As Sean mentioned, we're co-directors of Vermont River Conservancy. I'm going to start our time here tonight with some background on Vermont River Conservancy, who we are, where we're headed generally, and then Erin is going to dive into the science and the mapping as our resident ecologist and all things sciencey. So. Vermont River Conservancy, we protect and restore rivers for people and wildlife. And so this means a lot of things, but we protect headwater forests, we protect floodplains, wetlands, all the parts of the river, and especially now with flooding, those places that allow rivers to freely flow across the land and overflow and absorb that energy and keep our communities safe. And we also connect people with rivers through education, outdoor recreation. Many of you maybe have heard of us through some of our swimming holes, paddlers trails, places like North Branch Cascades, just up the road about 15 minutes. If you haven't been there, it's a gem and you should go. So Vermont River Conservancy, we've been doing this work for about 30 years now, and all across the state of Vermont. So this map here shows the more than 100 places that we've protected over that time. And there's a wide variety of places where we have worked over the years. And really, as the little icons represent, there's the heron for conservation and fish and swimming and camping along rivers and paddlers. Those each represent our real kind of dual purpose, our multi-purpose of the conservation and also connecting people through recreation. And so this history was on our mind a few years ago now when we sat down to build a strategic plan, which is pretty wonky, and strategic planning is not really the topic tonight, but is relevant because any of you who have been through strategic planning with an organization, it's kind of this existential moment where you sit down and you're like, who are we and what do we really do really well, and what does this world need from us right now, and how can we make the most difference for our state and for our rivers and for the people that we serve. And so we were sitting down as an organization, as staff and board with partners, initiating our strategic plan conversations with these ideas and questions in our minds. And right in the middle of it, it was 2023, and of course you all know what happened. And right here in Montpelier and so many places all over Vermont flooded really traumatically. And so really quickly, I'm sure many of you were mucking out basements, maybe your own places flooded, neighbors helping neighbors, and really dealing with the immediate impacts and trauma of these floods. And the floods really, in many ways, helped to focus us as an organization. And we showed up and said, yeah, you know, we've been doing this work for 30 years. And when we protect land along rivers, it does help keep our communities safer. And that's the difference that we can really make at this time. And what we were also recognizing is that even in the trauma, the hurt, the pain of the flooding, there were also these glimmers of hope and positives that come with floods. Our rivers have always flooded for millennia, and now us people are in the way of the rivers, and that's when the trauma happens. But the floods provide this natural recovery where you have rivers discovering old bends and curves and channels that they hadn't maybe seen in hundreds of years, creating new and improved wetland habitat, wildlife habitat, people connecting with rivers and thinking about rivers in new ways. And in many ways, I think that's the foundation for this whole series here at North Branch, right? You all are here in many ways with that continued desire to say, how can we do better by our rivers and what can we learn, which is a really exciting piece of hope for our work of looking ahead to that long term and that future. So with all of this in mind, coming out of our strategic plan, we said we want to focus on the entire watershed, the headwater forests, those old forests especially, that have spongy soils and can really hold water up high before it even gets to our communities, wetlands, floodplains, the places where rivers flow through the center of our towns, and how we interact with those rivers in our communities, and all the bits of wildlife habitat and all the places in between. And we also knew that we wanted our work to benefit many of Vermont's most vulnerable communities. And the strategic plan identified these values. It didn't say where, it didn't say how, but it said this is the direction we want to go in. And so it's from that that we then launched into a strategic conservation plan, which is the sciencey part of things. And I'm going to turn things over to Erin to talk about the how and the where.
Thanks, Kassia. Yeah, so thank you all again for having us here, and I'm happy that you're here to learn a little bit more about our organization and now our new, hot off the presses, as they say, strategic conservation plan. But before we dive into the plan and its finer details, I want to take you on a trip, on a watershed tour. It's going to be brief. It's called Why Rivers. For thousands of years before colonization, the rivers of this place had the freedom to meander and flow. Flooding was a regular seasonal occurrence that indigenous peoples understood and were prepared for. Now imagine yourself flying over a watershed. You're headed up into the steep mountain slopes, and you get to the chance to kind of dive into those old forests where you see the water, the spongy moss being soaking up the rainwater and snowmelt and charging the groundwater. And now let's follow that headwater stream down into the valley where you see that river spreading out across those wide floodplains, and you see beaver gnawing on alders and fish weaving downstream against the rocks that are smoothed by the water. And then you flow with the river down into Montpelier. And you see people recreating. You see them swimming and fishing and hanging out by the Winooski River or the North Branch or Stevens Branch up in the headwaters a little bit farther. And they're looking really peaceful, and they're looking at that fish that just came over the Cascades because the dam's been removed. And you see kids playing and throwing rocks and other people fishing and people swimming. Doesn't that look great? Like, can you envision that in your mind? All right, well, thank you. That was just a quick trip. I could take you farther into the crevices of these rivers. So before we began our planning process, we really like to sit down. We're a small but mighty team of 6 folks, so we like to sit down and come together and talk about things. And so what we did before we began our conservation planning process was we sat down and we talked about what our organization's values were. So on the heels of our strategic plan, we were like, okay, we know what our values are, but like, really, how are we going to do this? So we talked about what we want to protect. Well, we want to protect rivers, but why? We talked about who needs our help and why. Why do they need our help? And then in the same conversation, we talked about where we work and why we work in those places. So here's our why. Simply put, we look at the way rivers move through and change our landscape. We work to understand how rivers positively and negatively impact people and the places and communities they live and work, and the places they love and care for. Our why is to work with watershed and community partners at the local, regional, and state scale to fine-tune our work, to learn from each other, and to develop collaborative conservation projects that protect and restore rivers for people and wildlife. And as importantly, our why is to build relationships with landowners, meeting them on their land and around their kitchen table, to hear their stories of how the river has moved and changed over time, how it has impacted them, and how we might work together to protect and steward that river. So now I'm going to start to get into the science part of things. Nope, not yet. Okay. Thank you. Oh, whoa, what happened to that image? Interesting. There we go, okay. So our conservation planning process, after we stood up from sitting down and gathering, talking about our whys, we got to work. And it began in late winter of 2024, 2025, on the heels again of our strategic conservation plan. We started to build the framework of our plan. We developed our approach, fine-tuned our processes, created protocols and tools like lots of forms and templates, and we tested them along the way. At Vermont River Conservancy, we love science and data, especially when it comes to fluvial geomorphic data of streams and rivers. Who here knows what fluvial geomorphic means? Okay, I know a few people in the room know what this means. So I'm just going to share it with you. Fluvial geomorphology is the scientific study of the physical processes, erosion, transport, and deposition of sediment that shape channels and their surrounding landscape, including floodplains and riparian zones. So we were getting really nerdy around data and science. And over the last 2 years, we developed a methodology to take all that data and stream geomorphic data and look at ecological conditions and map and then capture priority stream reaches. So that here, you're starting to see some of the data being coalesced into this beautiful map throughout the state. In addition to our basin planning, mapping, and analysis, we identified those stream reaches you just saw. We overlaid state and regional priority areas that link wildlife corridors and forest blocks. And this map is a map from the Nature Conservancy just showing their priority focal areas. So we wanted to see what other organizations were doing, how they were looking at protecting and restoring these watersheds of ours. Because our mission is to protect and restore rivers for people and wildlife, we came back to our values conversation. We found a tool. We're like, sat down again. We found a tool that provided socioeconomic data, and we created criteria. So there's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of tools using census. So you all fill out the census, 2020 census, lots of data in there. Information around linguistic isolation. So that was one of our criteria. We had different criteria, excuse me. I'm going to back up a little bit and say, we created these criteria thinking about our values and people. And the why. We're trying to get to the why in this plan. So we had criteria around information access. How would you know if a flood came if you don't have internet? Or you can't hear? Or you don't speak English as your native tongue? Another criteria we looked at using data again, we love data, is housing and transportation. Where would you go? When the flood comes, where would you go if you live in a manufactured home in a floodplain? If you lacked a vehicle or weren't on a bus route or rented your home and you don't have any other place to go? Another criteria we looked at was how do people become prepared? So financial preparedness. Are they financially prepared to move out of harm's way? If you're a low-income person, it's really hard to move out of harm's way and find another place to go and live. We looked at housing cost burden, and we looked at outdoor workers. Outdoor workers, unfortunately, don't get paid that much money. So how do they move out of harm's way? and how do we help them? So we took all this data and we squashed it together, and we created a community impact score for all the watersheds throughout the state. This new information really helped us figure out where we were going to work and the why in those places. These slides are, oh, those are interesting. So these are 9 priority basins within our conservation plan that we'll be working in over the next 3 years. So our plan is from 2026 through 2028, which is great because our strategic plan is running right alongside it. And these are the basins. The 2 in green there are what we call our legacy basins. We have conservation easements there. We've been working with partners in those basins for years, and they also showed up in our social values mapping, but those are the 9 spread throughout the state.
I'm sorry, you mentioned 2 in green.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Sorry, the limey green is down here, and then that one there, and the rest are, I guess, are like more of a teal color. So again, 9 basins that we plan to work in over the next 3 years. And now I get to tell you more science stuff. So we have excuse me for one moment here. So our watershed approach, as you might have realized, our approach is at a watershed scale. It's structured and proactive, and we do that in order to assess potential conservation projects. It incorporates that vetted scientific methodology. We have multi-step processes and really useful tools. So I'm just going to go through the steps here of what we do in each of the watersheds that we're going to be working with, and I'll share some of the test cases that we worked with also in parallel last year. So we've chosen our priority watershed, and we go and we sit down and we collect a lot of data. That's stream geomorphic data, ecological conditions data, wildlife corridor maps, you name it. We put that all together, and then through a fluvial geomorphic methodology that is about 15 pages long that we had Mike Klein, who's in the audience here, a retired river scientist from the state, help us to develop this vetted scientific process to identify stream reaches that have storage and depositional processes that are expected or that are occurring. And why? Because we wanted to find those reaches that were most susceptible to erosion and deposition in order to be able to protect them. So we do all that work. We analyze the stream geomorphic data. We've got stream reach data. You guys probably don't know about that. It's really cool sciencey stuff. And then in step 3 here, through all the crunching and mapping and a lot of coding and the magic of GIS, we identify large parcels that have those depositional and storage capacity. And then those we label as our priority stream reaches. And then you can see here in 3 and somewhat in step 4, the highlighted colors there are parcels. So we've identified a priority stream reach, and then that stream reach has land around it, and so we determine what that priority parcel or parcels are, and we start to do a deep dive into what is happening in that landscape. What's the surrounding land use? How much space does the river have to move? Where are the homes there? It's just a plethora of information. Again, using maps and data. We put that into a long list, a big spreadsheet, and then we, again, analyze some more, looking at habitat connectivity, water quality, what are the food systems even surrounding it, and then we kind of say, wow, we've got a lot. We've got a lot there. And then we talk to watershed partners, right? Because we can't just do all this work ourselves. There's too many priority stream reaches in the state. There are too many priority parcels in the state. And this is not just us saying it, but the State Rivers Program is saying it, and other organizations are working on similar things. So we gathered together people over the course of last year in multiple watersheds and shared with them huge maps of these priority reaches and parcels. And that helped us to build relationships. We got to hear from Vermont Land Trust folks and people at the regional planning commissions and the natural resource conservation districts, got to hear what projects they're working on and where we could collaborate, or where they're like, hey, how about you take this one on? Because it's not really in our bailiwick. We got to hear from folks about, oh, that guy over there, he's really psyched on conservation. He does riparian buffer plantings. He's just like in it to win it. He wants to conserve his land. You should go and talk to him. And hey, do you want me to introduce you to him? So again, we're just trying to build up those relationships. And once we have those relationships built up within our watershed partners and we have our list, we then go out and do a landowner outreach sort of campaign, if you will, where we're calling up landowners, we're sending them letters, we're asking if we can come to their site. And again, as I said earlier, sit around their kitchen table and learn how the river has moved over their time, and what they'd like to see, how they may or may not like to conserve it, but just kind of what they've experienced. So I'm going to jump to our test case last year. This is one that's really like near and dear to me. So the towns of Johnson and Wolcott, and really most of the Lamoille Valley watershed, was heavily impacted by the big July floods of 2023. These are just some quotes here from folks that were working in the community at the time. This is the Lamoille watershed. So it's in northern Vermont, and if you're not familiar with the Lamoille watershed, it runs east to west. So the headwater forests are on the right there, and then it flows through farmlands, some beautiful large forest blocks, many, many tributaries. There are 15 sub-watersheds in the Lamoille watershed itself. And then it flows, like I said, west into Lake Champlain. Why we chose this watershed in particular to work through our approaches and processes was because, one, it showed up on our social values map as being really high for needs from the community. Looking at those different criteria, the score was really high. It also has a regional ecological significance. Like I mentioned, there are forest blocks, there are also these farmlands which are culturally and for like socioeconomic reasons important to protect those farms from the rivers, but to do it in a way that we're conserving those rivers. And the Lamoille Valley also has recreational value. If you haven't been up there, the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail is an amazing trail that runs across the entire watershed and along the river there. The partners in the watershed were another reason why we chose this. The Lamoille Planning Commission, the Lamoille and Franklin Natural Resource Conservation District, and a lot of the villages and towns there have already been doing work and preparing their communities for the next hazard. So they've developed hazard mitigation plans, they've developed flood resiliency plans, and now they're ready to act on those plans and conserve their lands. So we want to be an organization that's working in those communities that want to do the work together with us. The Lamoille watershed is also underrepresented in terms of watershed organizations that are doing this type of work. So we run through this process with every watershed that we have prioritized to see who the watershed partners are, why we're there, and how we can collaborate with all of those folks. Oh, golly. I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. This is just more data. So we do this throughout our deep dive watershed analysis. We do national hydrograph data sets, stream geomorphic data, priority reaches. Here's just a zoomed in version of those priority reaches, looking at the features that we identified, those indicators. Oh my goodness. I apologize, these did not look like, they don't look like that here. So, yay. This photo on the left with people skewed there is our watershed partner meeting that we had in Hyde Park last April. So after we did our mapping and analysis, we brought 20 people together, watershed partners that work in the Lamoille watershed, and we dove over people's laptops and, like I said, our watershed maps spread throughout the room, and really got to hear more about those projects or ones where there are potential opportunities. This one is just showing our ground truthing efforts. So we take, we've got photos, we've got maps, and we bring those maps to the landowners whose legs you can see there. I have to tell this one quick story. In the Lamoille watershed, this lovely woman took us out on her ATVs, and we spent about 4 hours with her, and we just drove down the Browns River, which is in the Lamoille watershed, and just looked at and took data, collected data, took photographs. I think I am, yeah, so back real quick to this. No, I'm going to leave it here because these photos are way better. I cannot underscore enough the importance of building relationships with landowners who are interested, or even just have like a little smidge of, oh, tell me more. Going back and just meeting with them and explaining to them the importance of this work, and just hearing how they have experienced the river flowing through their land. And that relationship building is super important. If we don't have that, we cannot conserve any of these lands. And I think the same goes for our watershed partners. We're working with them to just engage and make sure that we're not, one, maybe stepping on toes, but also like just learning from each other about how to do this right. Thanks.
So building on that relationship piece, Erin shared where we're working in terms of our priority basins, but then also a bit about the stream reaches specifically and the parcels. And in each of these priority basins, we know that has always been the case for our 30 years as an organization, that conservation works better in community with people. And so paired with this work in each of these places, we're working on outreach, education, community engagement to get people involved and to connect with rivers. So whether that's helping to build trails along rivers, this is the top right photo is shortly after the 2023 floods in Barrie, helping to repair a trail that had flooded along a river, planting trees together. So doing that hands-on work on the ground and learning about these places, but also connecting with one another and learning about the opportunities for conservation. And then from these relationships are also surfacing projects. And so people in these conversations are saying, hey, my neighbor has land that might be really wonderful to protect, or there's this place that's really special in our community, you ought to go take a look. And so from this community relationships and outreach and education is also now surfacing really amazing conservation projects. So we're working to protect several hundred acres of headwater forest at the headwaters of the Green River and the far southern part of Vermont. This is a watershed that provides drinking water for tens of thousands of people in Greenfield, Massachusetts and surrounding communities. And so it's really important that we're looking across our borders and thinking about how our work can really benefit people downstream who may not even be in Vermont. Surfacing wetlands conservation opportunities and floodplain conservation opportunities that we might not have found otherwise without the outreach and education. that even some of you are part of. We have a book group in Montpelier. I know Lynn and John and some of you join us. We gather at North Branch Cafe, 8 a.m. Every week on Wednesday. Anyone's welcome to join. We're starting a book group in Barrie. It's meeting Thursday evenings. And these types of things are great opportunities to learn, but then also are helping to surface these opportunities as well. And then I know I started early on in this presentation thinking about recreation, which I think is a way that a lot of people know about Vermont River Conservancy. And that's still a really important part of our work. And so we steward about 40 different river access sites, whether that's swimming holes, campsites along rivers, places to launch a canoe or a kayak, fishing access sites. We're still doing that kind of work and looking for more places to protect, because we know that with land turnover, there are more and more no trespassing signs can go up and cut people off from their rivers. And so our ideal projects, again, the photos are doing funky things here, but this is a look at a few different projects that we're doing in the Missisquoi. And so our dream, our vision, is that in each of these priority basins, we have these projects with these overlapping benefits in a single place. And that means that we can do projects side by side in adjacent communities and have impact at scale. And so whether that's working with families who have farmed for a long time, land that's really too wet to farm, and working with them to allow the land to revert back into a wetland and let the river find its meanders and filter the water and keep our rivers clean and keep our communities safer during floods. Helping to build stairs to a fishing access site, place that's really popular with the community in North Troy. We just finished up building a path to the river and these stairs to make that a better access point. Planting trees and thinking about how these many places might be connected through linked conservation efforts and also linked recreation opportunities. And so this is the benefit of having these priority basins, and also really strategically, like Erin's shared, looking at which parcels to protect so we can maximize our impact in single basins. And so that brings us to the conclusion of our slides, though I'm sure you all may have questions for us, and we'd love to hear from you all what more we can share. Like, love to open it up for questions. John's already got his hand raised.
What are we looking at on Wednesday?
The group started out reading.
Kassia, just a reminder to repeat a question.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
So John wants to know what book everyone is reading on Wednesday. So the group started out this fall reading this book, Seek Higher Ground, and loved it so much that they invited more people to read the same book, Seek Higher Ground. And we've got a copy for one lucky person here tonight. We are now reading Hans Estrin's Montpelier Rivers Report that he produced for the Montpelier Conservation Commission in 1995. And he's sharing, he's going to come join us next Wednesday. And so, and just have a small conversation about rivers and opportunities here in Montpelier. So anybody who wants to join that, let me know. I'll send you around a PDF of Hans's 1995 work. Judy, right?
Carol.
Carol.
In your talking to landowners, are you seeing, you've been around for 30 years, are you seeing a difference in acceptance of your proposals by the landowners?
Absolutely. So the question was, we've been around for 30 years. Are we seeing a difference in landowners' reaction to our proposal to conserve their land? And I would say yes, absolutely. I mean, the floods were really bad, but they also brought people to our organization. They were emailing us, they were calling us, they were like, tell us more about the work that you do. And we were still building our strategic plan, but we're doing that work. And now, so in the last 2 years, we have been going out and meeting with those landowners with we have some in the back there, sort of like what our plan is boiled down, and sharing what a river corridor easement is, land acquisition, we also conserve land, like we purchase land or land is donated to us and we conserve that land through mainly easements. And so people are learning about easements and the importance of protecting rivers and saying like, I'm in. So yes.
Naomi?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can talk more about, I guess it's like a three-part question. What are you protecting rivers from in Vermont? Is it development? Is it recreation? Is it, tell me more, I don't know. What are you protecting them from? And then what, you started getting it at the end there, Kassia, but what are you actually doing when you protect a river? What do? Are you protecting the land around the river, or are you working, yeah, I don't know. And then I guess if you can link that even one more step to floods, like which of those steps are the most important for floods?
Okay, I'm going to try to summarize because you asked three questions.
Sorry.
Okay.
Tom said not to do.
So Naomi, is that it? Naomi asked three questions about rivers. So what are we protecting when we protect rivers? What are we protecting it from? Thank you. How are we? I'm sorry.
What do you do to protect it?
What do we do to protect?
And then can you link that to floods? Yeah.
And
How does it link to floods?
And then, okay. So, what are we protecting rivers from? How are we protecting rivers? And please relate it to floods. Okay. Thank you. So, what are we protecting rivers from? From development. So, go back to our watershed tour. Like rivers are very dynamic, and they want to just move and curl around, like look like snakes, right? And so, if we have development that's right up against the edge of the bank of a river, that river doesn't have any place to move and meander. So we're protecting rivers and their river corridor. So every river has a corridor, and it's based on science again, bankful width and all these different like calculations. And so we're hoping to protect a river corridor, not just the river channel and the banks of it, but the corridor, so outside of that space, so that there can't be any development. And with the floods of 23 and 24 and more to come, lands that are in agricultural use, those lands are being flooded, right? Because there's no vegetation. A lot of farmers are farming because they need to farm. They need to get the most out of their land, farming right up to the edge. And so if we protect the river with a river corridor or wetland easement, or we'll just call it a conservation easement, we're protecting, we're allowing that river to move so then it can become revegetated again. There's no further agricultural use within 50 feet of the top of the bank in all of our conservation easements. We're trying to get more. We're trying to go for 100 if we can, if the landowner is in agreement with us. Okay, we're protecting rivers from flood, development, from erosion, fields being, yeah. Did I answer your question about the?
Can I add to the from? Maybe?
Yeah, sure.
My first thought when we ask what are we protecting rivers from, we're protecting them from ourselves. We are rivers' greatest enemy, and rivers have always flooded, forever. And it's a natural process, and they overflow their banks, and it's actually quite renewing for the landscape and moves sediment downstream. And you think a lot of the areas of Vermont that are like the best farmland, and they have these really wonderfully rich soils because of the floods. And when settlers first showed up and said, where would we like to build our houses? The floodplains are perfect because they were already cleared of trees and things like that, and they were a lot easier to build on and relatively flat. And so we started putting our houses in the way, and we have not stopped. And the reality is that with climate change, we're going to see more floods, we're going to see more drought. Drought makes floods worse. Anybody who's tried to water a dry plant, you know that the water doesn't go in the plant, it goes over the pots. And it's the same thing on our land, right? And in this era where we know there's going to be more problems with the water, at the same time, we continue to put ourselves in the way. And so we do that, like Erin was saying, by like, we've channelized our rivers for years. So if we want to build a road next to a river, we move the river over. And we just put the road right there and say, hey, you stay there, I'm going to put my road here, and you stay in your straight line. Rivers don't go in straight lines, they'll go in twisty-turvy lines. And so, and every time as a society, not in Vermont, but just nationally all over the world, every time that there's been steps forward to keep communities safer from floods, like say a dam control or something like that that's supposed to do that, people then build in the way. So like if you look at Wrightsville Dam, just up the road, was built in the 1930s after the 1927 flood. What did people do immediately after Wrightsville Dam was built? They built a bunch of houses right around Elm Street. So all of those houses went in because they said, oh goody, there's a dam, like we can put our house here now. And so like that's a really obvious scenario, but we do that over and over and over again. And the damage, like the monetary damage from flooding is skyrocketing. And in part we could say, well, it's climate change, there's more rain, there's more floods, whatever. But we're also increasingly put ourselves in the way, and we're to blame because when we put ourselves in the way, there's going to be more monetary damage. So it's this like cyclical thing. And so in many like we are river's worst enemy. And when we get out of the way, we keep ourselves safe and we allow rivers to move and bend and shift. And when a river does this, I do an exercise with kids where I say, hey, run here and run out the door just as fast as you can. And they sprint and they're so fast. And if you put up cones and say, go to here, to here, to here, to here, it's obviously slower, right? And if they're holding a jug of water while they're doing it, every time they go around that corner, that jug of water is going to slow down a little bit and drop a little sediment, drop some trees, that kind of thing. And that's really good for our landscape. And we don't let our rivers do that anymore. We've asked them to do this, and we've put ourselves alongside. And it's this situation where they're not listening to us and they never will. It's water. Water always wins. And so we need to get out of the way and let rivers be rivers. What was question 2? How do you protect? Go.
Well, let's go back to the conservation easements. We protect rivers by placing conservation easements on the land. And then once those conservation easements are in place, they're forever and ever and ever. We steward those conservation easements. And so we have the rights to manage the channel, which we're not ever going to do. We passively steward the river and the river corridor by just letting the river do what it wants to do naturally. We go in and plant riparian buffers, willows, alders, shrubs, trees. We're doing that this spring. In the Champlain Valley last year, we planted 1,000 trees across the state in riparian corridors on easements that we hold. And then we steward and we go out and just educate people more and more about, hey, these conservation easements are really great, and look, we can plant trees here, and we can allow the river to have its sinuosity again, rather than looking like a straight shot tube of water coming down. Does that answer all of them? Okay. Lynn?
Are there any places along the rivers where you've actually been able to get a 100-foot easement?
Yes.
Please repeat the question.
Yes, I will. Okay. Are there any places along rivers where we've been able to get a 100-foot buffer on our easements? And yes, there have been some landowners. I can't tell you where those are because some of them are private, but yes, we negotiate that. And we have one, yeah, I think it's 100 feet. Ridley Brook in Duxbury. So if you're going up Camel's Hump Road to go hiking, Ridley Brook comes down. It's a beautiful trout stream. We worked with the State Forest Parks and Rec and Vermont Housing Conservation Board to put a river corridor easement on the Winooski River and then a 100-foot buffer on the Ridley Brook which is great. So people can still go there. You can still, that's a public conservation easement now that the state owns the land. So you can go and walk along the edge, and it's not a no walking zone. It's just giving, again, that river space to move and flood for the waters to spread out. You're welcome. In the back there.
Which metrics is VRC using to define their goals? I may have missed this, but, and how are you looking at sort of like climate data or climatology data to look at maybe what is a good year? Like, are you being flexible with your goals? Because you can't really compare 2023 and 2024 to this year. In some ways, drought versus flood, but is, you know, in terms of, I guess it's more of like a data question. Like, how are you quantifying your goals?
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
That's a tough one. So the question was, how are we quantifying our goals? There's lots of different climate data sets out there that we have looked at. We looked at them specifically when we did our course values mapping, just to see, yeah, what's happened and what's coming. But we don't use modeling so much, except when we do our deep dive watershed analysis. We're looking at hydrology and hydraulics studies that have been done in some watersheds. So that's like really granular information. And we look at LIDAR, but we don't look at any modeling per se. And our strategic conservation plan has some goals that I know we can achieve, but we haven't yet set up an evaluation system other than to, one, get feedback from those watershed partners to see how we're doing along the way. We have those steps built in over the course of each year, but it's a good idea to see, like, yeah. So thank you for that.
Like kilograms of phosphorus reduced over the course of the year, just,
yeah.
you know, sort of.
And we do when we do that watershed analysis, we're in the Lake Champlain Basin. We're looking at the functioning floodplain initiative tool to see how much phosphorus is being reduced, but again, our approach is really like watershed wide, and then sub-watershed, and then stream reaches and parcels. So it's a little bit different, but I like your idea. Yep.
Can I add to that as well? A lot of people, I think, when you think of conservation or how you might measure metrics, the first thought is acres, and how many acres did you protect? And that's not our goal. We want to protect the right places along rivers, even when they may be relatively small parcels individually. And so other land trusts may go out and say, oh, we protected thousands and thousands of acres this year. That's wonderful. We're looking specifically at the river corridor, so we might be working on 10 acres or 20 acres, and we're going to celebrate that because it's the right place to be protecting that land. And so just in terms of metrics, it kind of throws that one out the window in a lot of ways. And I think what we're trying to do by focusing on specific basins and even reaches within those basins is line up not a parcel here and a parcel here and a parcel there, but ideally many parcels along a reach where we can really have those tangible benefits and see the river regain its natural form and function for habitat for our communities, all of that, that we're going to see add up in maybe small acreages at a time in the right places.
When you're speaking with landowners, prospective people with land you really want to have under conservation, what's their main resistance? Is it financial?
The question was, when we speak with landowners, what is their main resistance? And I think financial is one of them. There's transactional cost. I think Kassia is our development director, and she puts together all of our grant proposals. We work together as a team, all of us do with her. So she does a great job at finding those extra funds when a landowner really wants to conserve the land. We really want to work with them to conserve that land, but they can't quite afford it. So I'd say it's pretty much, financial, or maybe it's just not the right time, depending on the age of that individual, they might be like, I'm not quite ready for that. I still want to work the land, or I still, I'm not quite bought into it, or I'm, going to sell this land soon, and so I'll just wait until it's sold and someone else can deal with it, and decide if they want to conserve the land. And so, yeah, those are the two.
I was reading in the State Climate Resilience Plan this week that one of the highest priorities is to do these detailed hydraulic studies of rivers. And I know one was done on the Whetstone Brook in Brattleboro. VRC did a big protection and restoration project on the Whetstone, and I think it might be a good example of some of the things that people have been trying to learn. Could you kind of share what that restoration project is thought to benefit the community?
Oh, yes. So Whetstone Brook is in Brattleboro. The 12.4 acre parcel that we protected and restored the floodplain of is called Kikita Aki. And that was a name we worked with a number of Abenaki folks in Canada and in southern Vermont to come up with that name. And it means the river that runs through the land that changes. It is a urban it's an urban river park. And so it had been for 150 years or so used as a lumber mill. A lot of industrial pollutants were placed on the land, and I don't know how many years ago now, probably 20 or so years ago, that land was no longer being used in that way, and Vermont River Conservancy bought the land about 15 years ago and worked over the course of time to restore that 12 acres in order for that Whetstone Brook to access its floodplain and the wetlands surrounding it. The Whetstone Brook comes down really sharply and then flattens out less than a quarter of a mile as a crow flies into the Connecticut River. And so this place being restored for the community, and well, for the river and for the community, for both, it has now, and yeah, I think we might close your eyes. I think there's a great picture of it. Oh man, I'm not going to find it fast enough. But there's a nice pathway where when it floods again, people can just wipe off this low impact trail. There are elderberry, there's currants that have been planted there. People are going there and like harvesting the berries, and I think there's some nut trees that have been planted. People go there every single day, 365 days a year since it opened up, and it's brought people to Brattleboro, and it's brought, I think, vitality to Brattleboro in this part of Brattleboro. And I think it's bringing people into the community. They're spending money, so there's economic benefits to conserving and protecting, restoring these type of places for people to go out and recreate and just be in nature in an urban environment.
Did the models tell us something about how flood levels in Brattleboro? I don't remember what the numbers
Yes,
are.
okay, yes. Okay, you're going to get me thinking about the data here. Say again?
It's 4 feet locally and a foot downtown, I think.
Yes. So the question that Mike asked was, could you tell a little bit more about the impacts that that study had on, or the impacts that that study, the results of that study and the work that we did to restore that floodplain and drop the floodplain down so the river could access it. What we did, the result of that work was that we reduced flooding by 4 feet in that area. So imagine standing on like a floodplain, a flat piece of ground, and 4 feet of water being, up to here, thereabouts. Well, now that water can just spread out in that area and disperse. And then it reduced flooding by about a foot in downtown Brattleboro, which, like I said, is very, very close to this area. Yeah. So that could be happening in all of these communities throughout Vermont, where we could, 12 acres is not much land, especially in an urban environment. That's a lot of land, actually. So.
I have a question from the chat, from all of the folks watching at home. First of all, the question says, this is fascinating, or the person says, this is fascinating, so thank you. And he asks, how is the new priority basin focus different than your organization's approach in prior decades? What did you focus on before?
That's a good question. So everyone online heard that or read that. Okay. Thank you. Just want to check. So how is this strategic conservation plan different than priorities that our organization has had for the last 30 years, we'll say? Is that roughly? Priority basins. Well, we never had a strategic conservation plan. So we were very opportunistic. When people would call us, we would typically say yes and figure out ways to make it happen, which is great. But it wasn't strategic. And we, as Kassia said, we really want to have these layering benefits in watersheds, in communities, for our rivers and for our people and for our wildlife. And so we weren't focusing on priority basins at all. We were just like, oh, okay, we've worked in the Winooski, we have some partners there. Oh, they reached out to us, and yeah, this sounds good. We can do this, and here's this 10 or 12 acre river corridor easement. And then, oh, over here in the Lamoille or in Windham County, you name a place, like we probably have a conservation easement there. And now it's like focused on these 9 basins, using science, using data, and align it with our values and our overall strategic plan. So it's very, very different.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
One of the pieces of this is that there's work to be done, like a lot of work to be done. And I think everybody can name a person, a community, a friend, a neighbor who's been impacted by flooding and wants to see something done. And our work is the long-term solutions. It's not bringing people housing immediately after, or food or shelter or those types of things. But our work is thinking, we don't know when the next flood is coming, but we know, and we don't know exactly where it's going to come. We know it's going to come to rivers. Flooding is, in fact, the most predictable natural disaster type because it's always along rivers. And we know that it's probably going to be bigger. And so we need to be thinking long term and helping our communities prepare. And so, like Erin mentioned before, we have a lot of people calling us up and saying, hey, can you help us out? And we have a small team. We have 6 people. We can't do all things in all places as much as we would like to. And you had asked earlier kind of the landowner response. And after we are doing all this info to figure out which are the best reaches and parcels, and literally sending out letters to people and saying, hey, can we protect your land? We weren't entirely sure how that would go. And the response, we're getting like 50% back saying, hey, come on out, check it out, which is a little bit of a surprise, right? And so now we have a team of 6 people trying to do all these easements in these places. And so the basin piece is helping us to do that in specific areas. But even within those basins, the biggest piece that we need going forward is just our capacity. There's more work to be done, and we know that our work is a really key part of the solution for our communities. And we need more staff capacity and more resources in order to do this work at scale. And so we're tackling now what we can as a team. Our plan right now is to close on 13 conservation easements this year, which will be a record for our organization. We've never done that in 30 years. And we would like to do more of that, and we need the people in these communities, and we just don't have the people power to act on the landowner interest and the community interest.
Is your new conservation plan on your website?
Almost.
No.
We just pressed publish on it on like Friday. And so it is about to have a button on our website. We've got a few copies of, there's a long, like 65-page version. And then we've got like a 4-page kind of overview. We've got a handful of copies in the back of the room. But I'd be glad to help distribute that maybe with North Branch Nature Center and Naomi's help and follow up to this to get that out to all of you.
You sent out to landowners, is it just in the Lamoille watershed?
No. So last year we worked in the Lamoille, Memphis-Magog, Basin 11, which is West Williams and Saxon River, and then the Upper Green River watershed in southeastern Vermont, and a small portion of the Upper Winooski River, so 2 subbasins. Say again? Cabot, no, Stevens Branch, so the sub-watersheds were Stevens Branch and Great Brook. So Great Brook in Plainfield and Stevens Branch in Williamstown and through Barry and Berlin. I think we sent 50, we sent probably over 220 letters across all those, total. To landowners, and like Kassia said, we're getting like 50% response rate. So we were really busy out in the field last year, ground truthing and meeting with landowners, and now this year we're working on prioritizing those landowners and those parcels that are really interested and want to get things going, and looking for some money to scope those projects out a little bit more, to fine-tune what the landowner wants and what we can do for them to conserve their land. Yes, Lynn?
When you create a buffer, so let's say it's Monday and your team is going to go out and create a buffer for an easement. What does that look like? What are you doing?
Yeah, so it's...
Repeat the question.
Oh, golly, thank you for the reminder. So Lynn asked the question, it's Monday and you're creating a buffer. What does that look like? How do you do that? Great question. How we do that is, so we have the river corridor, we have the river corridor. We have an idea of what the easement boundaries are going to look like, so the edge of that river corridor, or that boundary line, and then the buffer, 50 to 100 feet. I remembered we did one that has 235 feet. That was with the Nature Conservancy, so they were like, yeah, sure, what do you want? So, yeah. We asked for 450, but we got 235. That was pretty good. So we mark it, but we work with a surveyor to delineate our easement boundaries and then to place on a plat that 50-foot or 100-foot that's on a plat. And then our stewardship manager goes out after the easement's been closed. The next year, she goes out and stakes the buffer so that the landowner is aware, or if the landowner is leasing his land to a farmer that's doing crop work or plantings, they know, okay, here's 50 feet and we have to stay outside of that 50 feet any work that we do. It's like a no-mow zone. We just want to revegetate naturally.
Can I add to this description?
Yeah.
I think my guess is that many of you have heard about conservation easements. You know generally what conservation easements are. Usually, you might think of a conservation easement as like a line on a map, like a box that says this area is now protected. And that is true. That's how our easements work. But our easements are a little bit unique. So our easements put that box on the map, and that's the limit of the edges of the easement. But the restrictions, which are what you can and can't do because you now have a conservation easement, the restrictions are tied to the top of the bank of the river. And so when the river moves, the easement moves, the easement restrictions move. And so that's Lynn was asking about the buffer, and that's what that is the edge from the top of the bank to those restrictions. So maybe you could, if it's a farm field, and many of them are, we see, if you go up towards Plainfield from here, you can see so clearly the service that farm fields provide during a flood, right? And so we work with a lot of farmers who they give up the opportunity to farm right up to the river's edge. And in return, they receive a landowner payment compensation. We work through the Department of Environmental Conservation Rivers program, can often help compensate for basically the loss of the value. You can't hay your field all the way up to the edge. You can't harvest your corn all the way up to the edge. But we know that you're providing our community a service by allowing the trees and shrubs to grow up in that 50 feet or 100 feet from the top of the bank. Well, then there's a flood and the river moves. That 50 feet or that 100 feet, whatever's in the easement, that moves as well until it gets to the very edge of the easement, which is the box around the river for our easements, in which case the landowner, it's out of the easement area, they can do whatever they want, they could riprap, whatever. And so that's why it's really important when our staff go out and the surveyor go out to think about not just what is the river doing now, but what do we expect it to do in the future. And so I was out with a landowner on the Mad River last summer, and I think it was one of the first easements that Vermont River Conservancy had protected many years ago, and guessed about, hey, here's what the river is going to do. And now the river is starting to get up against that edge. And in hindsight, probably should have made that box a little bit bigger so that the river could have a little bit more space. And so that's what we're doing now on each of the projects, is bringing in more of that long-term insight to have a bigger, largest possible river corridor, and then also the largest possible buffer, like the space from top of bank, in each of our easements.
I just want to add. I want to add, because I know where she went. For that landowner, they, over the course of, I don't know how long we've had that easement, but let's say like 10 or 15 years, that landowner has like bought into conservation. So when the MAD shifts, which it will shift because it's the Mad River, it's going to move over and it's going to probably cross that boundary at a certain point. That landowner is not going to go out there and say, hey, river, I'm going to put some rocks here. They're going to say, hey, river, keep going. That's through educating that landowner and the community about the importance of these easements, placing these easements, restoring the land, stewarding the land. And I mean, I feel like we could say that about more than half of our easements. People, I mean, maybe even all of them. People are like, yeah, no, if it's going to move. There are some people that might get a little ornery about the river moving and want to put rocks. But I'd say we've done a really good job over the years in educating the landowner and public about the importance of protecting these rivers. John?
I really appreciate that you deal with science, because that's so important in a political world in particular. What do you do with farmers where after a big flood, much of their field's covered with sand and it costs them a lot of money to remove that sand? Is there a way to prevent that or reduce that from happening? And how do you keep them in the fold?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, when we're working with farmers and there is a flood and sediment is laid down on their farm field, within the easement or outside of the easement, how do we work with them to probably remove that sediment, and how do we keep them in the fold? I'm trying to think. So I'm just trying to think of like some examples here, recent examples. Some farmers that we don't have easements on, but that we've been talking with the Conservation District folks about how because they work really closely with farmers more than we do. They are chatting with farmers and the farmers are like, well, I guess I'm just gonna leave this material here and flatten it out. I can't think of any farmer that we've talked to that has said like, hey, I wanna dig in the dirt and like move all this material out.
There have been.
Oh, yeah.
Cabot, Dog River Farm.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just inundated with sand primarily.
Yeah, no, I've been up that stretch before. I'm just trying to think like if there's any examples where we have worked, where the farmers said like, I can't think of any where we specifically have said like, okay, no, you can't do that, or hey, let's work together. So, sorry about that. In the back there.
I'm curious, you talked a lot about private land. I'm wondering about public land and like the Department of Transportation and how much you're interfacing with that.
Oh, do you want to talk about, yeah, for North Branch?
So we, as a, the question was, the question was about, that's what I was going to say. The question was about our interface with public lands and I think public agencies. And so public lands that you might think about as like a state park or a state forest or national forest, we don't tend to work on those lands as specializing in conservation easements by nature is on private lands. But with that said, you mentioned the Department of Transportation, and so we have been talking a little bit, quite a lot about infrastructure of roads and bridges and things like that, and a lot of those areas are owned by DOT. DOT is probably one of the biggest riverfront landowners in the whole state. DOT has one of the very best opportunities to take the lead on floodplain restorations. And we see that just up the road at the DOT facility in Berlin, and where there are the giant orange snowplows, I think, are parked there right now. That facility flooded something like 8 times in the last 12 years or something like that. That's not necessarily where we want to be keeping our salt and our sand and all of our big heavy equipment. And so their plan is to abandon that site. So you've seen chain link fence and things around it. And so they're working on abandoning that site and hopefully have a restored floodplain there. So there are opportunities that interface. And then a piece of our work is also around, we've been talking about the conservation easements, but also recreation. And so many places that you might go to launch a canoe or a kayak or bring your fishing pole, those are often interfacing with DOT properties in terms of like bridge abutments and things like that that have public access. And so we have actually several recreation sites that we've protected, sometimes in partnership with DOT, kind of adjacent lands in order to provide that public access. Does it have the very highest conservation value? Not necessarily, because there's a bridge in the way that's holding. Our goal is to let the river move, and that bridger's goal, the DOT's goal, is to have the river stay put in one place. And so from a recreation perspective, it's a great place to go fish. You can access the river, but doesn't necessarily have that conservation type benefit.
Well, thank you, Kassia and Erin, so much for joining us as part of Naturalist Journey series. And just, thank you all for such a great question and answer period, too. That was great. So let's give a round of applause.
And as we depart, John Snell brought a copy of his Seek Higher Grand book that he would like one lucky person to go home with. So if you are interested in learning more about floods, the history of floods, it's an awesome book. I've got a copy for you, so come find me.
Great. I'm sure that Erin and Kassia are happy to answer questions if folks want to ask. And please come back for our next presentation in the series, which I think Sean said is February 12th. So thanks for coming out tonight, folks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.